Welcome to the Community Championship podcast, hosted by me, Matthew Williams, Tournament Director for the Community Championship.
It's the biggest sporting event in Aramco history, with over 5,000 participants competing in over 90 events and over 50 nationalities showcasing 20 sports. The Community Championship. The opening ceremony for the finals is happening in Dhahran on the 26th of March from 9 a.m. With live music and entertainment, food stalls from around the world, and fun activities for children and the community. See you there.
My guest today is Jonas, British high-performance coach that can make anyone faster. Owner of Speedworks, Jonas has worked with elite athletes across the world, with athletes running sub 10-second 100 meters, as well as working with international and professional teams in a multiple of sports. He was mentored by Dan Path, and this episode is going to blow your mind and make you even faster. Good afternoon, Jonas. First question for you straight off the bat then. Do you feel with your level of experience and expertise that confidence is contagious?
Yeah, 100%. Of course it's contagious. And you know, we've got these mirror neurons in our brains. And I think that's how we grew and why we are. As humans, we do better in a community because we grow off of each other. And just like confidence is contagious, so is depression and negative thinking. So yeah, I think we can influence each other based on how we feel, how we move, how we talk, for sure.
So kind of just give a little background of you for people that might not know you, from graduating with a master's degree in sports science to becoming, in my opinion, one of the best sprint coaches in the world, working with Olympic medalists and international sports teams. Let's kind of dive into this journey and how it began. So where did the drive and passion come from to become a sprint coach?
I was playing rugby and was a forward and always big boned and heavy, but always a bit elastic and pretty fast. Due to injuries and due to issues, I had to work my way back to getting in shape. And I realized that what I was learning and what was as normal practice in rugby was not going to be the solution. I tried it multiple times. My colleagues, my friends did. And there was constant re-injury or constant just lack of transfer of our training. We're getting bigger, stronger, but not faster. And so I realized, let me research the best in the world and in rugby and in football. And they weren't really saying anything different to what I was hearing in my environment. So I decided to think a bit more laterally, look at track and field, look at other sports that were doing it really well. And really it was track and field, and look at 100-meter sprinting, and figured that if I could understand how to get an elite sprinter to run really, really fast on a specific day, that in order to have done that, I should have at least developed some expertise in all the key areas needed to get faster. Planning, programming, periodization, biomechanics, strength and conditioning, sports therapy, athlete mindset. You need to know enough about those areas to get someone to run really fast on a given day. And so, you know, I came out of rugby and I had a big question, and it sent me into athletics.
And then elaborate on that kind of journey. So you've transitioned out of a Hartpury with your degree. You've got this passion and this kind of crave for knowledge within the sprint and how to make people faster. What was those next 3 or 4 years like before you kind of started Speedworks?
I guess I finished my degree. I realized I wanted to know more. I did a master's again at Hartpury. For my master's thesis, I found that learning about expertise was important. So I found the best coach in the world in Dan Path, who wasn't just the best coach because he coached Donovan Bailey and elite athletes to run fast in the 100 meters, but he was an expert to me because he could work with all sports, multiple events in track and field, not just the sprints, and had a heuristic, a way of looking at training that was simple enough to be applied in multiple environments. And that was very unheard of. So I studied him. I went to the States. I nearly did a PhD and could have been Dr. Dodu. And that would have been awesome on my CV. And I would have made my children call me that from now on. But it didn't tickle my fancy because I didn't feel like being a doctor in sprinting without having coached someone really fast would have sat right with me. I thought it would make sense to do it that way around. So I didn't take that opportunity up in Canada. Instead, I spent 3 months with that coach I talked about, Dan Paff, and studied him, came back to the UK. And luck would have it that within 8 months of me going to him, he was employed by British Athletics in the build-up to the Home Olympics in 2012. So I had 3-4 years of being his apprentice, spent that time literally sharpening the knife and learning how to coach, and spending immense amounts of hours helping with rehab and watching video and having no pressure to create performance. The pressure was to learn, apprentice. The pressure was to accelerate my growth. And so that was that. And then, by the time we got to 2012 Olympics, I had a 400-meter guy that was running there, 4 hurdles guy, but 2 athletes I had inherited from my master coach, Dan. And then I had 4 or 5 Paralympic athletes that I had been working with for 3 years, who were all cerebral palsy girls, apart from a lower leg amputee. And that was a great experience, because in my first 3 to 4 years of coaching, I had gone to a major games. In a senior major games, I had gone to 2 junior major games in World Juniors and European Junior Champs. I had travelled the world. I'd been exposed to a great amount of amazing coaches and therapists. And in all that time, all I was charged to do was to learn and develop and focus on honing my craft. And that was the best backdrop to the rest of my career, because I could make lots of mistakes in a healthy environment and could accelerate my learning. And then after that, I started Speedworks, started a charity. We've got 2 arms of Speedworks, a charity working with kids and development athletes and development coaches. And then we've got the performance arm, which basically is just an extension of what I was doing before. Continuing to learn, continue to accelerate my growth, and I just happened to do it with elite athletes.
So if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing with people, and I'm sure you could probably talk about this subject for a long while, but what are the key fundamentals to becoming faster? You listed a couple of the traits there that you need as a coach to understand to be able to improve someone's speed, but are there a couple of key pillars that you could share with people to becoming faster?
Yeah, I think before we talk about fast, we should just talk about efficient. I think efficient sprinting and efficient explosive actions evolve or revolve around producing large forces in short times in the right direction. That's really our goal. And that would be the summary. If I had done a PhD, that would have been the summary of my large forces, short times in the right direction. In order to do that, you would think that large forces come from gym work. And it is right. Having strong muscles, strong joints and tendons, having a good nervous system and its ability to produce force makes sense. And so doing that in the gym is helpful. There's also this right direction thing. And in order to orientate your forces in the right direction, certain muscles in a certain order, and again, in a very short amount of time, need to be able to do that. So then we start talking about using the gym to develop the physical qualities, using your coaching eye and your clinical reasoning to point those qualities towards the right muscles. And essentially, a really easy summary is big bums, big hammies. Yeah, big bums, strong hammies, better yet, are really needed for sprinting, and stiff ankles. If you've got a strong, stable pelvis, you've got hamstrings like elastic bands, and you've got ankles like stiff springs or like golf balls, then you'll be a really fast runner. And when you see different types and different styles of runner, often it's because maybe their distribution of hammy and ankle is a bit different. Maybe they're more hip dominant, maybe they're more ankle dominant, maybe they're better at being on the ground, so they're a bit more concentric and that gym work was really, really needed. Or maybe they're better off being in the air and they're a bit more elastic. And so really it's down to the plyometrics and doing more of the running to get their physical qualities to be the most. But it comes back to large forces, short time, right direction. And when we think of that, we have to think of 2 things, physical and technical. And you could talk about that maybe as hardware and software. You want an F1 car that has big wheels, big engine, well-oiled, exhaust, well-balanced, but you also need the software within that machine as well as the driver to be efficient. And you can't have one really big and one okay. It will always just, result in average performance. You need both of them to be at your top. if you want to create world-class sprinters.
From a technical point of view, when we're talking about the word stiff ankle to people that might not know that term or what they're looking for, what does that actually mean?
Stiff ankles, and really what I should say is elastic ankles. But stiff ankles and elastic ankles, they're transducers. They take energy from your legs into the ground, and they get energy back out of the ground into your body to give you your propulsion. So the example of your ankles being a spring or being a golf ball, the reason I say golf ball is just not any ball. In order to get the golf ball to fly or to bounce high, you need to input a lot of energy into it. You can't just drop it, right? You need to input some good energy, either the golf club hitting it, or you've thrown it down to the concrete and then it will spring into the sky. And you need to put energy into it because it's stiff. So you need to make it bend, you need to make it squash, but it's also will reform, it will go back to its original shape. So it's stiff. Stiffness is needed so that it acts as an elastic band. It acts as a spring. So stiff ankles to me are a physical property supported by your Achilles and your calf and your ankle structure, the bones and the foot that is actually acting like a bridge. So that's about the physical structure. And then, yes, of course, it needs to have the right timing. You need to land on the ground in the right area in order to make the most of that spring. So when we think about stiffness or we think about elasticity, there's two things I think about. I think about the physical structure and how I can build it with resisted work. But I also think about the coordination needed to land with the right joint angle in the right place under your body so that the rest of your body can be the actual spring or reap the rewards of the spring action.
And you said that the basis for speed or for becoming faster is to have good glute and hamstring. Could you also explain the reason why that is the case?
So if you look at the biomechanics of sprinting or just think about physics, your foot and your leg need to be moving backwards when it lands on the ground so that you can be pushed forwards. Yeah, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. So you need something called negative foot speed. You need your foot, once your knee gets out in front of you, and your foot maybe swings out a bit, you'll need your leg and your foot to be back under you so you get propulsed forwards. That's the goal, right? And so in order to bring your thigh from this position to resist your leg going out and bring it all the way back under you to push you forwards, that's very much your glutes and your hamstrings and some of your medial adductors, but we can call it glutes and hamstrings. So we know that, so that's one thing, the action of the leg is necessary. The other thing is that sprinting is done under immensely short amounts of time on the ground. And so if you think about, or if you understand muscle structure, the strength that we apply in the gym is generally done under a very long amount of time. Each rep or the speed you're moving at might be 2 meters per second maximum, whereas you're sprinting at 8, 9, 10, 11 meters per second. You might have, 300 milliseconds or 400 milliseconds to perform each rep of a squat, maybe even longer. Whereas a sprint in acceleration is around 200 milliseconds and very, very quickly drops to 100, 110, 120 milliseconds. So what we're talking about here is that sprinting is an action that we cannot really replicate well in the gym, firstly, is my point. And secondly, is an action that requires or relies more on eccentric and isometric muscular action. So in order to do that, we're talking about using your tendons more and using certain muscles that are designed to be elastic bands. Your hamstrings are definitely designed to be elastic bands. And so what they do is, instead of you having to wait and be on the ground, load up your concentric tissue, maybe your quads more, and push concentrically against the ground. The aim is actually in the air to load up your hamstrings so that they whip into the ground really aggressively. And then actually you already have produced the force that you need in the first half of your ground contact. So your hamstrings give you the ability to cheat. As humans, we're not designed to run fast because most of our muscle tissue is not designed that way. But the only way that we can find a way to to apply those large forces in a short amount of time is to actually wind up and create tension in the air so that when we're on the ground, we can get on and get off. So that's the primary role of the hamstrings. The glutes, what happens is the glutes act as a really good foundation for the hamstrings. They help stabilize your pelvis, and also they can help with this action. And as you start to fatigue in sprinting, really strong glutes allows you to keep doing this action. So you can find that some hamstring injuries, I'm going off course here, but some hamstring injuries and some issues people have with sprinting may not be that their hamstrings can't do this action, but their glutes fatigue really early. So the foundation needed for this action dissipates. And lastly, you look at the 100-meter sprint, and you look at 8 people on the start line before the final of 100 meters, and rarely do you see a small bum.
One thing you keyed there is flexibility, and a lot of this will go out to, entry-level athletes or younger athletes. And from my experience coaching, one of the challenges can be the importance of stretching. Are you putting a alignment with flexibility as well is beneficial for speed?
Yeah, for sure. Mobility and stability, like if I'm thinking of a youth athlete, mobility and stability become intertwined with each other. If you want to be stable in your core, if you want to be stable when you're sprinting and making big splits between your arms and big shapes between your legs, you need to be mobile enough to get your hips or get your joints into certain positions and stable enough to hold them there and not to be thrown off from getting them into those positions. So I think some people talk about Mo stability because if you intertwine the two together, you really create core strength. So I think that mobility, flexibility is, yes, an integral part of all of what we're talking about here.
And then let's take it to I'm a junior athlete. You've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of junior athletes. What are maybe some of the misconceptions that you come up against or you hear in your trade about, should I land on the front of my foot? Should I land on the heel? Should I hammer back with my arms? What are the kind of things that you see that is kind of a continual misinformation? And what would you say would be the basics to build a strong base as a young child? Let's take now from a 7-8-year-old through to, a prepubescent, maybe 13, 14-year-old.
Common problems are people running too much on their toes, because by running on their toes, it makes them land out in front of them. And if you land out in front of yourself, you end up blocking and breaking each step, breaking and slowing down your speed and having to redo your speed. So I think a common problem is landing on your toes. Now, it doesn't mean the solution is to land on your heel. The solution is to land on the ball of your foot with your ankle cocked, with your toes up to your shins. So you're having so imagine that's my shin and that's my foot. So I'm having a 90-degree angle at my ankle whilst my forefoot is on the ground. That's a great position. It's actually the perfect strong position for your ankle to apply force and to be stable. So a common problem is foot placement. That's one. Another common problem is everyone thinks you have to drive and accelerate forever. And I do want you to accelerate for as long as possible, but you don't have to be in a lower angle to do that forever. The lower angle you can come out with at the beginning, the better, as long as you can keep getting longer in your stride length and keep getting higher in your body angle and keep getting lower and lower in your ground contact time, how much time you're spending on the floor. But a problem is that most kids just want to bend over and pretend that they are in dry phase. So their upper body is bent over, but their hips and their legs are almost pushing them up, and they're fighting against themselves. So that's one problem, is over-rotating. I'm going to call it falling over. Trying to accelerate, but actually falling forwards. That completely destroys your ability to transition and get to top speed. The second, or the opposite problem, is just standing up. It's not trying to push yourself forwards and just standing up straight away and getting to your upright running without any momentum. So those are two opposite problems. So what's the solution? Finding the middle, finding the appropriate amount the appropriate angle and appropriate amount of distance to create in your first couple of steps, and allowing yourself to rise gradually like a plane. If you can do that, then each of your phases will be really smooth. That's a common problem.
How do we pose to deal with some of those things? So maybe the drive phase, what are the key fundamentals of that? So we've talked there about, a couple of things, landing on our toe and maybe coming up too quickly. Is there any things that you see with arms? Is it good to cross your arms over your body? Should they be going backwards? What's the kind of thing there?
Okay, fine. If we talk about arms and posture, your arms support your legs and your arms help you balance. And what you'll find is that your really efficient and good sprinting allows you to keep most of your body in the middle when you're going forwards. But actually, your body should always be rotating because that's how your body works, right? We have an engine in our pelvis and we're constantly rotating. So we need to be able to have the core control to rotate so we can use our arms well. And we need to have the core control so we do not side bend when we think we're trying to rotate. And that's what you often see is lots of side bend. If you don't have the core control to rotate and to anti-rotate, you might have lots of massive rotations. So core control for rotation is small rotations. But if you can't control it, they become big and your arms have to cross your body to help counterbalance that. So your arms weren't the problem. They were actually a solution to try and keep you stable. The problem was your trunk. The problem was coming from your mid part of your body, from your pelvis and your core, and your upper body is just trying to solve it. It's just trying to help it out. So the solution for kids is always going to be become stable. You said it with the mobility thing. If they're mobile and stable and strong around their pelvis, they know how to stack their joints, which essentially means put their feet under their body to create a spring throughout their ankle, knee, hip, and trunk. Then you've given them the underpinning qualities to be stable. And then they need to explore. And you said something about prepubescent. Of all the young kids I've worked with, if they've learned what it feels like, not what they've been told to do, but if they've learned what it feels like to be fast, what it feels like to be efficient, if they've learned that before they go through their peak height velocity, so before they go through their puberty and start having massive growth spurts, they get it back really quickly. Because everyone will lose some coordination as they grow dramatically. Everyone, no matter what. Suddenly, you go from your arm being, 30 centimeters to being 50 centimeters to being a meter long, right? That's a brand new arm. You need to re-coordinate that limb. And then you need to re-coordinate it with the rest of your system that has also grown and changed. And through those growths as well, like suddenly the lever length is longer. So your core control, your core strength requirements exponentially increases. So suddenly they're in a brand new body. Now, if they've already experienced and problem solved and had fun with speed and being elastic and efficient prior to this phase, it's very easy to find it again because it's part of their neural network. It's already inside somewhere. It's just a connection to the limb is gone. Whereas if they haven't expressed that, if they haven't found that stuff prior, and then they go through peak height, and they go through this massive growth spurt, then and then they start to try and learn it then, it's always challenging. It's always so much friction because you're not just learning a brand new skill, you're learning it in a brand new body. I would say key things for kids, coordination, control and stability, learning how to be explosive and elastic by getting free energy. Free energy is all about where you put your limbs and how stabilizing your pelvis can allow you to move your legs quicker. But more importantly, if they learn it early, it's easier to fix things when they go through growth spurts.
Can I go into a little bit of detail on if you've got a youngster and you think that they were using the terminology have like a kind of a weak trunk, what kind of basic exercises would enable a young athlete to start improving their trunk strength?
Very strict and stable positions that I would suggest, and I can go through them briefly now. And then you've got some very fluid things that you can be doing. So strict and stable positions are very much your normal core exercises. You're planking, but planking not just for time. In fact, I don't really care about how long you can hold it for. It's position. Are you doing it with your head cocked back, your diaphragm flared, massive arch in your back, your pelvis dumped, and your hip dropped to the side? Or is your diaphragm down? Is your neck neutral? Is your shoulders stable? Is your pelvis under you so you can feel your abs on? You don't have a banana back, a massive arch in your back. You have a nice stable back and your pelvis is through because that's replicating what we want in standing, right? And so I don't really care if you can hold that for 30 seconds. I first care, can you hold it in the right position for 10 seconds? If you can do it for 10, I'm not necessarily going to go to 20. I'm going to say, can you hold it in the right positions? But for 10 of those seconds, can you move your leg out to the side, one leg? Now, this word is disassociation. long word for the kids. It's just basically, can your body stay stable whilst your limb is doing something else? Or in order to take your leg out to the side whilst you're lying in that plank, does your whole body arch to the side or tilt down? Or do you find some way to use your whole body just to move your limb? That's not disassociation. And that's what happens in sprinting. That's what the problem we're having in sprinting is that the guys, in order to try and run fast and hit the ground hard, like innately they know they have to hit the ground hard in the right direction. But if they can't separate hitting it hard with their limbs as opposed to using their back, they end up pushing on the ground and arching their back to try and push off the ground. When they finish arching their back, in order to get the leg back in front, they end up arching themselves forwards to try and lift their leg forwards or arching sideways. But the stability that we want in their sprinting is that their trunk stays strong, stable, and their limbs move aggressively without their trunk really batting an eyelid almost, without having the trunk have to compensate for what the limbs are trying to do. So that's what we're trying to coach, that movement, that feeling. A normal plank can be a great opportunity to start to challenge stability with coordination, start to challenge some disassociation. I would plank on my hands, on my elbows, on my front, on my side, on my back. Again, on my hands and elbows, in all of those positions, holding a long plank. So this is very much, you can pull this out of gymnastics world. They will do this at base age, 3, 4, 5. This is what they'll be doing. And so that's one way of doing it. I would be throwing med balls all day, every day. I would be teaching wood chop progressions. So just basic progressions of how to rotate and keep your hips, your legs stable, your trunk stable, and only rotate at a specific point. And even at that point, I'm trying to rotate around my diaphragm, around my thoracic spine. So it's like my upper shoulders is doing or my upper trunk is doing the rotation, but I'm able to use my obliques and my lower abs and even my groin and my glutes to keep my lower trunk stable. My lower trunk will rotate a bit. My upper trunk should do the majority of the rotation. And that's how we sprint well. Guess what? When we don't sprint well, you see crazy arms and crazy stuff. Normally, the upper trunk is not moving, rotating this way. It's just swaying. And the lower trunk is doing so much rotation. It's coming all from the middle and all from the bottom. And if that's happening, then your pelvis is becoming really unstable. So we're talking about how do we isolate rotation in specific areas of our body. Again, it's the same word, disassociation. How do you stabilize one area and rotate another? So I would say pillar strength is what all of those plank variations is. I would say rotational strength, so a range of med ball exercises and wood chop exercises and rotational type upper body work is a great way to do that. I would get them to pull heavy things, pull a sled, run up a hill, get something to resist their sprinting so that they can learn how to be strong and stable in a running action, but in a slow down running action. Each time you pull something heavy or run up a hill, essentially the running action is being slowed down for you. So you get an opportunity to express maybe more strength-related stuff, but in a running action.
So there was a reason for us to run up the hill at Hartbury then, right? So Paddy was right all these years ago. 100%. He was right. Yeah, no, exactly. Actually, he's the guest coming on as well. So it would be fun to pass on that when we were running up a hill that there was benefits of it. And it wasn't just some crazy SAS training, right, to try and kill us. So we talk about evolving as a company from where things were 10 years ago to where they are now. We see huge changes in my background of coaching rugby and the rugby athlete. From your point of view, Jonas, what kind of development have you seen over kind of 10 years now when we're talking about sprinting, maybe the opportunity to use technology, but also the athletes that we're seeing now at elite level?
For me, like personal to me, my journey and my company, the biggest development that we've seen is that elite level biomechanics was always done in the laboratory and needed really, really expensive cameras and really, really complicated software. And only the PhD professors were able to take that information and digest it. But what they always struggle to do, what science has always struggled to do, is make it digestible and applicable to my mum, right? Or a school teacher or a random athlete. It's always designed for academics. Whereas now we've got to a point where we've taken a really complicated process and we've dumbed it down and we've made it usable on an iPhone, and we diluted how we give our feedback so that it's digestible for everyone. Right now, we're seeing really, really good benefits across the board, where people are able to take accurate information about sprinting. And so there's less bias, there's less complication, and they're able to actually see themselves change over time and know how that change has occurred. So I think what's really happened is we've simplified the complex, and everyone can get faster. And whereas in the past, it was like you had to be a super professional athlete with a super world-class sports science team in order to get that information. Whereas now, because the way tech's gone, it's accessible to everyone. So I think that would be the major change in evolution, especially in sprint training for me.
And then you highlighted on there, because you said it, that people can get faster. Looking at the 100 meters, and there's loads of reports out there regarding, if Usain Bolt run the perfect sections, what his time would be, where we can go as a human being. What's your personal view on the 100 meter time? How much do you think it can improve over the next 10 years?
The world record, I have no idea, to be honest, because people just continually surprise you, and it all depends how far people can go. But what I definitely see, at least within the athletes I've coached, is, in 2012, there was three individuals that had run sub 10 before that. And now there must be a dozen. And so in a relatively small amount of time, I've had 2 athletes run sub 10, and other 2 coaches have had the same. And that's just been the influence of good education. That was majorly the influence of Dan Path coming to the country and having a number of interns and a number of apprentices and people that have just gone to watch him to learn. So I think the difference now is I don't think I can comment on the world record time, but it's almost like the average fast times, there's more people running sub 10, there's more people running sub 20. And really the major influence, some people say the shoes, some people say the technology in the track, how stiff the surface is. But if you just interview and watch training practice of different coaches, because of the internet, because of the courses that are out there, because of the common access to information and equipment, people are doing a better job of getting faster because they've simplified it. How much faster can the world record go? I have no idea. Do I think more people can get closer to it than before? 100%.
So just kind of like last 2 questions really for you now, maybe more for parents or people just kind of generally getting into coaching, but also all the way up to elite coaching. Obviously, you kind of have Dan Path very, very high up in your regards, and I can very much understand why. So the 2 questions here before the last one is, when you're building a session with an athlete, what are the key focus points? How are you building that session in your head is the first part of the question. And then number 2, what do you think was the key lesson that you really learned from Dan that has been something that you've applied from the minute of that lesson being learned for the rest of your kind of duration within coaching?
The components of a session are beginning, middle, and end. Yeah, just like a story. The beginning is always a warm-up and an opportunity, not just to run a lap and to do some stretches, but an opportunity to turn on all of the stuff I talked about earlier, the disassociation. So I expect in a warm-up, yes, some pulse-raising activities, but I expect that your hips, that your ankles, that your trunk have both feel mobile as well as feel activated muscularly so that they're ready to fire. The middle of the session is what I would call special strength. And this is an opportunity to do any specific drills, any resisted running, any explosive actions that are in part or in whole similar to sprinting. But what they definitely are similar to is the muscle contractions and speeds and forces needed in sprinting. So we call that special strength. And in the last section has to be sprinting. Has to be some kind of running, jumping, change of direction if you're a team sport athlete, either focus on the beginning of your race or the middle or the end of your race, and just finding a way to make the most of the coordination and power that you turned on in the first 2 parts of your session. That would be my session design for every session I do. And all that would differ is the content of that session, but it will be the same flow between. Then to the second question, down path, major lessons are speed is a skill. So if you consider speed to be a skill, just like driving your car or writing your name, if you don't do it for a long period of time, you can still do it, but it will be foreign to you. It will take a few reps. It will take some time for the fluidity to come back to you. Because it's a skill, it's something with repetition you can learn. And like I've just alluded to, by ceasing it, you can forget. So no matter how strong or explosive or in shape you are, but if you stop practicing what you've been doing to get where you are, it can easily be lost. Unlike fitness, where fitness is, if you're aerobically fit or even anaerobically fit, you could spend 4 to 6 weeks away from working on it. And as long as you've continued playing your sport or doing an activity, you won't lose much, if anything, because you transfer it to that activity. But if you're a rugby or football player or even a track and field athlete and you spend a lot of time, more than 2 to 3 weeks, more than 2 weeks, working on your coordination for sprinting, you will lose it. And just as well, if it's taken 2 to 3 weeks to lose it, it will take the same 2 to 3 weeks to get it back. So I think the major lesson is sprinting as a skill. Practice it from week 1 all the way to the end of the season, and treat your teaching of it like you would a teacher. Whole learning, small progressions every week, opportunities to refresh with the athlete, check for understanding. I'm saying do this with your limbs, or I'm coaching this point. Do you understand? Repeat it back to me. Give me it back in your own words. Go and coach your peer. Those are all the ways that you can check for understanding and just be a good teacher. Empower your athlete as a learner. So if we treat sprinting as a skill and we believe it must be taught regularly, we believe that we need to apply pedagogy and stuff from teaching and coaching science to involve the learner, then we will create long life learning individuals, growth mindset individuals who will constantly be reviewing and reflecting to try and improve, and will never feel like they can't improve. They will always feel like they can find a way to go forward. So sprinting as a skill is a heuristic that really describes all the stuff I've just said.
So last question. If you could pass on a lesson to improve someone else's life, what would it be?
I'm going to cheat and use the answer I just used. Growth mindset. I think the lesson in life is that if you have a growth mindset and grit, those two things, you can do anything. Like my son, who's 7, he watches Nick Pro and basically parkour guys and gymnasts. And he's like, wow, that's amazing. I could never do that. And I'm like, you can do anything. You can absolutely do anything. Can you do it today? Maybe not. Do you need to practice? Lots. Will you hurt yourself and get annoyed when you fail? Maybe a bit. But can you do it? Yeah, for sure. Anything you put your mind to with time, determination, someone to cuddle you when you fall down and some antiseptic when you cut your knee, and expecting those things to happen is also important. If you don't expect that it's going to be dark and dreary on some days, then it hits you by surprise. And it's almost, it hits you and you're not prepared for it. But if you expect it, it doesn't mean not hurt. It means that you know that there's going to be a silver lining to the cloud. It keeps you positive. It keeps you working. So grit to be able to deal with the monotony and the downsides of trying new things. Growth mindset to believe that you can do anything just with work. Enjoying the process. Everyone says stick to the process, trust the process. But I think you have to enjoy it. You have to enjoy the falling over. You have to enjoy fall down 7 times, get up 10. Like you have to enjoy that process. And that's where it comes back to what I said earlier, which is treating it as a skill and breaking it down and making it feel manageable.
Jonas, thank you so much for today. I mean, to be so A, insightful, B, so willing to share the information that you've got from obviously yourself with your knowledge, obviously what Dan's put into you and other athletes. It's just, a great opportunity for us all to learn and to continue to improve and listen to somebody that I revere to be one of the best people in the world of coaching.
Buddy, thank you very much for having me on.
And thank you for listening to this episode. The Community Championship is the biggest sporting event in Aramco history. The opening ceremony for the finals is happening in Central Camp on the 26th of March from 9 a.m, showcasing the finals of junior touch rugby and the 10K, with live music and entertainment, food stalls from around the world, and fun activities for children to get involved in. Keep listening for the next episode of the Community Championship podcast.